Okay. And how big are you?
How tall are you?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. We are your hosts, Colin Peters here.
Jeff Manfred.
John Rashetter. Yo.
The movie we are going to be talking about today is the one that started it all in movie cinema history. And if you are a fan of any sort of comic book movie out there, you have to take time out and show some appreciation and love for this. This is the 1978 classic Superman, starring Christopher Reeve as Superman himself, directed by Richard Donner, and it also has an all-star cast of Marlon Brando as Superman's father, Jor-El. Gene Hackman plays Lex Luthor, Superman's arch nemesis. Ned Beatty, I don't know.
Ned Beatty, I think
Beatty?
that's how he goes
Okay.
by.
He has an appearance as one of Luthor's henchmen of sorts.
Mr. Luthor.
Mr. Luthor.
Mr. Luthor.
Yeah, the hat he was wearing was fantastic.
And we have Margot Kidder, who plays Lois Lane, to round it out.
Oh, yeah.
People know her from Amityville Horror. And now
Black Christmas.
Black Christmas, yeah. And now she's Superman love interest in this. So, this episode is special to Jeff for a few reasons, and we're going to let Jeff take control of the show. Jeff, tell everyone why this movie is special to you.
It's because Superman's actually one of my favorite superheroes, because it's not really what he's viewed as, but is more of his costume. His costume is Clark Kent, because this is what he views us, as weak and pitiful, but it's also the best way to hide that he's really this most powerful creature from another planet. And it's like, it resonates because like it shows that there's so much that we are viewed as, but not what we want to be viewed as. And like, he's able to hide in plain sight. It's pretty, makes us look bad, because dude's literally wearing a pair of glasses and changes his hairstyle.
That's all it takes.
I'm like, really, guys? But other than that, like, it's a fun movie to watch. Like, I just recently rewatched it, actually 2 days ago, and I still enjoy it every time. Did not realize it hit its 40th anniversary.
Yeah.
I was
I didn't realize that either now.
and I was like, I was surprised with that. Like, I thought it was actually like in its 30s. No, I was fucking wrong. But it's an enjoyable run. Like, it felt like two different movies though, like because of it being so long.
Well, it actually was supposed to be two movies shot at the same time.
And Richard Donner was actually shooting Superman 2 as this movie was going on.
Yes.
Yeah, he was doing that. Yes, he was shooting two different Superman movies as it was happening.
Also, the Salkins or the Sarkins, they were
Salkins, yeah, they were the producers.
They were the producers, and they didn't have Warner Brothers attached as the studio originally to do it. But then, as typical fashion, movies tend to have issues, and part of the issues were it was going over budget. They were having some issues with technical effects, because a lot of what you see now, it definitely looks dated. It definitely looks, for the times. But what they did, nobody did before.
It was unprecedented.
So
thing was.
they didn't even know it was going to work.
It was a gamble.
Yeah.
And it did work. I can only imagine what it must have actually have been like for people in the audience to sit down and see it and go, is this really happening? Like, that's movie magic really taking people in control, because you saw some little effects in the 40s, like say House on Haunted Hill when the skeleton comes out of the acid, like little stuff like that,
The drawstring.
But yeah, I mean, you want to talk about dated, but this movie was like the no CGI, green screens, practical effects. It was really revolutionary for what it was, and there wasn't even a sign of, hey, let's practice this, make sure it works. It was kind of, well, is it working? Okay, we got to roll the cameras.
Right.
And that's why the movie ran over budget. They ran out of schedule.
Oh, yeah.
And so they had to like sell some stock
Yes.
Oh, wow.
to Warner Brothers, and that's how Warner Brothers got a little more control
Mm-hmm.
over the copyright. And once they had, I think they had all the first movie done, and they said, well, let's release the first movie, make some money, and see what we got here, and if we want, we'll finish the second one. And that's how it all came
Speaking
about.
of scheduling, too, Christopher Reeve is actually only given third billing in this movie,
Yes.
and he's the main star of this movie. But Marlon Brando was the highest paid actor at the time.
$2
He was-
million, I think.
He actually ended up getting $14 million for this movie, which is an insane amount of money for back then, because he actually ended up suing the production company for not getting the right amount of profit that he got for the profits of the movie. And he actually won in court. It was weird. And then Gene Hackman, of course, is number 2 billing, and he's not even until the last hour and 20 minutes of the movie where you're finally introduced to Lex Luthor. But they actually had to film all of Marlon Brando's scenes and Gene Hackman's scenes separately when they were not with Superman, because they had other projects that they were attached to. They had to film all their scenes first, and then they focused on Superman and Lois Lane.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah, they had to film all their scenes first because their schedules were piled up, and they were, of course, the big names at the time.
They were high in demand in the 70s. Well, Hackman, I could see Hackman more than Brando, but Brando was still an established actor.
Didn't he just come off of The Godfather? I think The Godfather was
Well, I think that was the early 70s, wasn't it?
yeah, and then Superman, the movie was 1978.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he like this guy had just won an Oscar a couple of years ago, so I guess
Oh yeah, I'm not taking
yeah,
anything
yeah.
away from Brando. I'm
still.
just saying I think Hackman would have been more in demand than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we get too into the movie, Jeff, why don't you please give us a quick synopsis of the storyline and plot to this?
All right, well, here's what I was saying about the two different movie feels, because like the first hour is pretty much an origin story showing what happened to Krypton, why Marlon Brando, his dad, sends him to Earth, and why the reasons are is pretty much it's the same planet, but it just our yellow sun gives him the powers that he has, where their red sun doesn't give him any powers at all. And then it kicks into Clark Kent growing up in Smallville, showing that he was already having his powers established, and his Earth dad is trying to kind of suppress it and hide it, because like it's a scary thing, like when your kid's an alien and
Sure.
has like all these superpowers. It's nuts. And then it kind of starts gradually going into him growing up, becoming the news reporter. But I don't think Christopher Reeve shows up until almost 48 minutes into the movie.
Something like that.
Yeah, they had another actor, and they gave him a prosthetic nose to kind of look more like Christopher Reeves. And they even talked about how Reeve overdubbed his voice.
So at least to keep the content going.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy, though. And then at that same time, they also, almost 20 minutes later, they introduce Lex Luthor, which really doesn't have that big of a part until closer to the end, where as it's building up, he's buying up all the land along Nevada and California because he wants to blow up the fault line.
Right.
I actually mixed the two movies up. I thought the first one was with Zod and the second one was with...
right. The movie starts out with General Zod,
Yeah,
which
that's
I did not know that it actually started with General Zod and his people, and then they get trapped in the Phantom Zone. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Obviously, Superman wins at the end, so...
Yeah, and like we said before, it was a very revolutionary movie of its time. It was kind of a project for the... You said it was the Sulkins or the Sarkins?
The Sulkins. I
Sulkins?
believe that's how you pronounce their last name.
Okay.
Sulkins.
They just kind of took it and ran with the concept of, hey, he's a popular character. Let's see if we can make this movie happen. And I believe Mario Puzo, who originally wrote The Godfather, actually wrote the treatment.
screenplay.
The treatment.
He did.
Yeah.
He did.
And they had said things like, I think even before Brando was cast, they were looking at people, like maybe the director of photography, I think, might have been involved to possibly direct. They kind of wanted a Godfather reunion. And they threw out all sorts of names, they said, too, to play Superman. Dustin Hoffman was one. Al Pacino was another one.
James Caan was another.
James Caan was another
Clint
one.
Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood.
Really, Clint Eastwood?
Clint Eastwood, yeah, he was considered. James Caan's the one that said, "I'm not getting in those tights."
Yeah.
Like some people did not take the tights seriously. But when watching this movie, you kind of just overlook it because you're so drawn in by Christopher Reeve's performance.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, before they settled on Christopher Reeve, they really pushed hard for Robert Redford.
Okay. He was another one.
And he was really popular in the 70s, too, and it was a box office draw. But he actually looked at the script and said, I think he said he liked it, but it just wasn't for him. Like, he couldn't do it.
Okay.
He knew it wasn't for him. And how Christopher Reeve actually came about was they didn't know who to cast for Superman at that point then, because they just had the okay to get everybody and anybody.
Yeah.
That finally they said, well, let's cast some other people. And Brando's name became involved, and then Gene Hackman's name got in there, and then they got attached, and they said, well, we have two big name guys.
Let's get other people to use those names.
Let's get some people who don't have a name, and then let these guys be the draw.
Let's draw them in.
And the character itself will...
That's a popular tactic that's used.
Oh, yeah.
And it's probably a lot better, too, getting a no-name to play the lead rather than having somebody who's already...
Right. You're not focused on that star powers him. You're focused on this new person who you've never seen before, and you want to see what he can do, or he or she can do.
Especially for a character that's like Superman. You know, he's an alien. He's got extraordinary powers that are way beyond like any superhero, really. I mean, he is the ultimate superhero.
Yeah,
whether you have your favorites
powers
or
keep
not.
changing from year to year. It's
Yeah.
like, originally, be able to leap tall buildings, fast in a bullet. Now all of a sudden you can fucking fly. Make up your fucking mind, all right?
Well, actually, I was reading up on that, and that you can actually thank Shazam for that.
I can believe that.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that movie.
what happened with that was Shazam was supposed to be a ripoff of Superman.
It was, and there was a copyright strike going on because they had two similar powers.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Shazam was the one who started flying first, and then DC had a lawsuit with them, and eventually I believe they won the lawsuit.
I think so.
And
Hold on. How did DC literally have a lawsuit with themselves? Cause,
it wasn't
or they
original.
buy the- okay.
I don't think it was originally
Shazam
DC.
wasn't originally DC. I
Okay.
think, yeah.
And he was originally Captain Marvel at that time.
He
He
was.
was the original Captain Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually they had that strike, and I guess they didn't do anything with Shazam for
He was kind of hidden for a while, then Jeff Johns kind of recreated the character with Shazam 52, where they just decided to call the name Shazam.
Yeah.
And that's how he came back into the fold.
And Marvel was like, well, we have this other character, we're going to name her Captain Marvel, and haha, you know, we beat you to it, DC.
Your character's dormant, we're going to swoop in and give another character of ours Captain Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And because there was that rivalry of Shazam and Superman, that's actually how they came up with him having the extraordinary
They
powers.
team up, and they do have some novels together. Oh, yeah.
But the point that I was getting to was, you
got you off track.
laugh. No, but no, it's something to talk about. And you're right. But what makes Christopher Reeves being an unknown actor work is that you're not going to project, like a film resume, like say Al Pacino or Dustin Hoffman has. You're not going to go, oh, here's The Graduate in blue tights flying.
Right.
Also, you're just going to be focused on this guy is Superman.
Also, there's the fear of clout. Like, this person, like, if they got a big name playing Superman, they would probably be making demands in terms of pay raise, in terms of what they want to say, what they can't say. But because they got somebody who's relatively unknown, just trying to make their way into the film industry, and they got someone like Christopher Lee, who's a very well-trained actor.
Juilliard,
Yeah.
I believe, was he friends and roommates with Robin Williams? I know they were friends.
They were friends. They were definitely friends.
And they went to Juilliard together. Mm-hmm. I do remember hearing that.
But yeah, there's that fear of clout. If they got a big name playing Superman, that they would probably be making some demands in terms of the script changes, in terms of salary. It could be anything.
Sure.
And so I think this worked out in their best favor to pick somebody who wasn't known.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, by far, I think he did an amazing job. I don't actually see anybody else playing him until Henry Cavill came along. So
You don't.
I remember when I first saw this movie, I saw it, I believe when the DVD came out, and that was 2001.
Okay.
I mean, in between times I had seen Superman 2 on TV.
Yeah.
And I liked it, and I said, okay, this is a pretty solid movie. And it was actually other family members who said, if you never saw the first one, we really recommend you see the first movie. And I thought, wow, my family members aren't as in the comic book stuff as I am. And here they're saying that the movie itself is actually a really good movie.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
And that's the thing with the first Superman is that there was no comic book crowd, there was no comic book audience, there was no
No.
Facebook or Twitter for the nerds to say, well, this and that didn't happen, and
All we had basically was word of mouth, and we had the Action Comics and the serials. There were like the small like black and white cartoons that came out. I actually remember watching as a young kid, watching some of the old Superman serials where it started out with faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive. And it was really something special. But of course, this was as we said before, unprecedented, where they're actually making a live action version of a beloved comic book character. It's never been done before, and it's a big risk and gamble, and it paid off.
I remember when I first pitched this idea of doing Superman, and I've had at least one person say, it's not the first superhero movie. They considered the original Batman TV show movie. And yes, it is a theatrical movie. Yes, it is a comic book character, but it wasn't made specifically for the motion pictures.
Yeah.
It wasn't made specifically for cinema audience. It was
It
a product
oozed
from
camp.
TV. It was a product from TV that they made into a movie as just another cash cow, really, is
Right.
what it was. I mean, when you watch the movie, it's fun. It's basically an extended episode.
Adam West Batman
It's
movie.
not.
Yeah.
It's not actually, a solid, formulaic, if you will, movie.
Superman was taken seriously.
Yeah, like I was surprised with like how much they promoted the hell out of this movie, and like you said, taking him that serious. Like they tried not to do as much campy stuff, even though it's the 70s. You're gonna get a little bit of cheese.
There was.
You got some in there.
Yeah.
You got a few things.
But I think it was done in there on purpose because you can't take something like that too seriously.
You can't.
Because still, you have a guy who's running around
And blue
in blue tights
Blue
with
tights.
underwear on the outside.
the big
and-
Boy Scouts.
Yeah, you don't know how it's going to work. And like we said before, a lot of stuff that they were doing was just so off the cuff, and it was, does this work? Okay, let's try to make this work. Like they said, the flying techniques were actually not just one thing. It was, we're going to do wires, we're going to do blue screen, we're going to play tricks with the lenses, and we'll see what works for this scene and this shot. And it turned out really well for the time. I mean, we look at it now, being our generation, and go, wow, that looks so bad. But even if you're not a film buff, you still have to appreciate it because this was a comic book movie made for the general audience.
It was.
It wasn't a comic book movie today like how the Marvel and the DC universe is all set up, where they really go heavy on the comic book backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
It was,
The Easter eggs.
yes, it was more, what can we do to grab an audience and have them come to the theaters?
Exactly.
And they had to make sure that the special effects worked. Because if they didn't, why are you going to see it?
Right.
I mean,
Actually, the whole reason they changed the color of the suit is because if they made it any darker, it started messing with the blue screen, and he was translucent.
I didn't know about
I did not
that.
know that either.
Yeah, like when I read that, I was like, I could see why, because it was like a little bit bluer, but not crazy. But I was like, and then as you watch throughout the movie, you can see sometimes that it actually did mess with it, but not enough to make it
To distract you. Yeah.
It's funny
exactly.
you say that now, because in 2013, I went up to Green Bay, Wisconsin for a Packers game, and at the atrium at Lambeau Field, they had all the Superman outfits from the movies there.
Oh wow!
They had the first one, the second one, 3 and 4. I think the one from the Dean Cain show too. Believe it or
Lois and
not,
Clark.
yeah. And Man of
God.
Steel, Batman versus Superman didn't come out yet, but
Yeah.
you could tell the Man of Steel one was definitely higher grade material and quality, and it looked really nice. But you could, I noticed the different colors in the blue tights from the first original Christopher Reeve movies, from like 1, especially 3 and 4. There was totally.
We don't have to talk about those two. We have those two. We don't
No,
have to get into that at all.
I don't see
We
a
really
reason.
don't.
I don't see a reason for us.
Oh,
to.
Superman 4. Quest for peace. Quest for suck.
And it was it. I'm not even gonna get into it.
That's how bad this movie is. All right, if you watch it, good luck.
Luck.
But
Take your Ambien.
More like sorry.
Oh man.
Yeah, I actually watched this movie again last night. I watched about an hour and a half of it the night before, and I watched the other half last night. And I gotta say, just even the intro was extremely expensive.
Oh yeah.
The intro with the
Like
flashy
3D,
credits, that
yeah.
was actually more expensive than like most movies that were being made back in the 70s. So even the opening titles were kind of a gamble. And then you hear John Williams' score.
John Williams.
John Williams' score is amazing in this movie. Originally, Jerry Goldsmith was going to be doing the score for this because he worked with Richard Donner with The Omen. And he worked and you can actually tell when watching this movie, it actually felt like the guy who made The Omen made Superman, just the way in the shot construction and the way how fear is being brought in, because there are some really intense moments and the shock and horror on some people's faces and the camera angles. You can tell that same director. And yeah, he had Jerry Goldsmith attached to do it, but then he had a scheduling conflict, but then John Williams came right in and made this movie happen
Yes.
with the score. It is so good. It gets you chills.
I had heard the flip flop in between John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith, and I thought that was actually a really funny story because it was like Richard Donner said, "Hey, you still available, John?" Yes, I am.
But he also ended up doing the Supergirl movie later.
He did.
So it ended up, he still got part of the Super family.
He did. But that's another movie we don't have to talk about.
I did hear a lot of people consider, out of John Williams' amazing film resume, a lot of people really consider Superman his best as a soundtrack.
piece.
Yeah.
Really?
Think about that.
Especially
Jaws.
off the heels of Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana
Oh, yeah.
Jones.
Jaws, Jurassic Park. I mean,
E.T..
E.T., Schindler's List. It goes on and on what this guy has done.
And it's kind of funny because to me, this isn't exactly the kind of theme you think about with John Williams.
Mm-hmm.
You like I said, you think Jaws, you think Indiana Jones, Star Wars. Those are the three ones that pop into mind.
Yeah.
But this is just as easily as memorable as anything else.
Oh, it
he's
is.
done.
It's a very iconic score. Oh, yeah. And yeah, you're right. It does go under the radar sometimes because people don't tend to think that this is the guy that wrote the Superman theme song.
Not at all.
And when the action scenes and when like the heroic stuff is going down, when you hear it, you really feel it. Oh, yeah. And like the different transitions. And then there's even like the more intimate stuff where Superman and Lois Lane are flying in the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. You can even hear like it's very soft, very subtle, but it's gorgeous. He really did some amazing things with this movie.
Oh, he was a master at using the music to tell you how to feel. Like when we talked about, I believe it was in our Exorcist episode, we talked about the music and how, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of music in Exorcist, but
Right.
the music does tell you how to feel in certain moments and parts. Like, should you feel scared? Should you feel tense? Should
Right.
this be somber? Should this feel uplifting of sorts? Like, even when the helicopter scene that Lois is in and Clark first comes out of the Daily Planet and he sees the commotion and he looks up, you hear the little trumpets just kind of building, just kind of building up, and then he looks at the phone booth and is like, yeah, no, I can't go in that one.
Can't go do that one, so I'm just gonna rip the shirt off.
And he goes through the revolving door, and as soon as he rips the shirt off, it starts picking up. Mm-hmm. And then even the pimp is like, yo, say, Jim, man, that's a bad outfit, bro. And Superman just goes, excuse me. And he just takes off, and the music just, boom, just takes you right into, this is the hero, this is how it is. Mm-hmm. And not only does he save Lois, he catches the helicopter, he's flying.
One fucking hand, and two. He's like,
One hand,
I
yeah,
got
man.
one hand.
Not only that, but he actually goes around Metropolis and actually takes care of a couple other crimes as soon as he drops the helicopter down the helipad.
He got a cat out of a tree.
He thwarted a bank robbery. A guy trying to like walk on glass with those suction cups, and he's standing vertically, just saying, "You know what you're doing there?" Just something like that.
And the guy was in shock.
I know.
Oh, you know what you did. Now stop it.
Even the arresting officer, he brings the guy to the officer, and then even he's looking shocked as he's arresting him. Like, Okay.
This motherfucker just flew over here and dropped him off. I don't even know how to explain this.
How do I file that on the report?
I didn't quite understand that scene though, because the guy had jewelry in his bag already. He's climbing up the building.
You almost think he's trying to break into the building.
Yeah.
He doesn't have anything with
But
it.
he climbs out the window, so I thought he was trying to escape after stealing it. So I'm like,
I guess you can. Yeah.
I guess you could
Yeah,
argue.
you can argue that point, but it's a little confusing.
But then at the same time too, when Superman drops him off, I don't think he could actually get arrested for just Superman dropping him off, saying like, "Hey, look at his bag." I think you should question him, because it's like, wait, doesn't he have to actually be caught in the act according to the
Right.
judicial system?
This is what he did.
This is what we're overthinking things. I'm sure the audience didn't analyze this movie like, oh good, he got the bad guy, and he's gonna go save somebody else.
I know we're very critical
We're
nowadays
nitpicking
to this. It was the 70s. I mean, DUIs were different then too.
Yeah.
So, hey, maybe they just arrested somebody. I mean,
Yeah.
the cop does say to his buddy cop, like, "Hey, this guy not only did he fly, but he had blue tights, a bright red cape, and bright red boots." Oh yeah, he wore that.
He also arrested 5 guys and brought a boat on land too. Did he have to bring the boat on land? But no, but it's fun and entertaining.
did he bring it back though? That's the thing. I
don't think he
curious
brought
about.
it back.
Like, you guys can take it back.
That's up to you guys. Hey, I arrested the bad guys. You can take the boat back to the water. I'm Superman, damn it.
And he didn't even have the name yet at the time.
No, he didn't.
He doesn't get dubbed Superman until him and Lois have the interview / date.
And that's kind of like after they're done flying, Lois kind of has that realization: Superman,
He's like,
Superman,
What a Superman!
what a
she says.
Superman. It has a nice ring to it.
Yeah.
And then Clark Kent shows up.
Yep.
The wet blanket.
And that scene then when she says that she has to go to the bathroom or put her makeup on or something, even though she already has makeup on. And Christopher Reeve takes off his glasses, and he's really considering just telling her right then and there, because he knows that. And that was such a good scene. It goes to show how good of an actor Christopher Reeve was, because
Yeah.
I had heard in interviews, and it is true, that I know we make fun of him because it's Clark Kent's the disguise and it's the glasses and the hat. Oh, how doesn't anybody see that? But it's the way he acts too.
Like,
He-
his whole demeanor just drops.
He's like
He's got quirks.
You don't
Oh,
think
yeah.
he's a strong person, even though he's 6'4".
Yeah,
you know,
6'4".
It's not
Broad
like
shoulders.
it's not that is the funny thing. It is like he's the lovable tough guy, but
Right.
he's really a teddy bear. You know?
Exactly. Like just the way he pushes his glasses up in his face, and the way he kind of has a little stutter, not too much with his speech, and his slurring a little bit. How he carries himself, and how he just goes, he'll do a quick breathe in and out, and then how he is just squeamish around danger.
Yeah.
Like just the way he sells his performance, you can tell he doesn't seem like this guy could ever be a hero.
Yeah, like you can't be
can't be
Superman.
Superman.
You're-
Especially even the scene where he and Lois are getting mugged. Like he's
Yes.
stuttering and trying to be like, oh no. Like he's like ready to hand the dude's ball, and Lois is like, absolutely fucking not.
Yeah. I'm tough. I'm gonna take this guy out when I get the chance.
I'm from New York. Come on.
How about when he catches the bullet?
Yeah, like I
Yeah,
didn't even notice
that
it
was-
at first.
That was great.
That was so well done. It's like you didn't need to see. You just it goes in slow motion, and it's like, yeah, he caught that.
Got the bullet, and then his excuse was he fainted.
Yeah.
That was brilliant. Like, you fainted? You fainted.
Oh my god.
And then he says, "Well, was it really worth risking your life for
$8 and like
2
some
credit cards
gummy wrappers?
and lipstick?" She goes, "How'd you know that? You just described everything in my purse." And it's like, lucky guess.
Oh my god.
I mean, he plays the dorky offset character so well. But what we don't also get in the movie is when he leaves Smallville for the first time and gets to the Fortress of Solitude up north.
Yeah.
We don't get a time frame as to how long he's actually up there. And I heard he's actually up there for 12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of big time jumps in this movie.
Yeah, and they don't tell you. And it's actually rather confusing.
It is.
I can see the him coming from space to Earth I can see the time jump there
Yeah,
because
he was in space for 3 years before he actually landed on Earth, so that he looks older than he was when he was a baby on Krypton.
and we don't know the distance from Krypton to Earth to begin with.
He just
anyway.
says another galaxy, so
Yeah.
it would take a
Probably
lot of
years
time.
away. Obviously, at least 3 years away from here.
Right.
And I'm not sure, are people on Earth supposed to know what Krypton is? Because
No.
when he says it to Lois, he goes, "Oh, I'm from the planet Krypton," and she goes, "Where are you from?" He goes, "Krypton," and she's like, "Oh, Krypton." But the way the way she played it was kind of like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of it."
Oh yeah, because she's infatuated with Superman. She's
Yeah.
almost like in a daze, right?
Oh, she's like,
She's in love with him.
yeah. I mean, the sexual innuendos.
I
through
laughed
that
my
interview.
ass off when she said, "How big are you? Tall are you?" I lost it.
And she just so happens to stand in front of a lead pot while he's like, "Oh, I've got X-ray vision."
Yeah. And she says, "What color's my underwear?"
I did not pick up on that. Like, well, it's been a while since I've seen it, but like those little things I just noticed for the first time in a while. I'm like, oh my god, there's a lot of adult humor in this scene
Oh,
right
yeah.
here. It's so funny.
It's late 70s. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean,
How big are you? Tall are you?
she knew what she was doing. She was all dolled up. Right?
She didn't get dressed up for Clark Kent, but
No.
She's like, "Oh fuck, it's Clark."
I think she even says when he's like, "Oh, you ready to go out? I got everything all prepared for you." And she goes, "That's Clark, nice." Another thing before we forget is we talked a little bit about Gene Hackman and how he shows up more towards middle
It's
to
like the
end.
middle to end of the movie. Yeah.
But I don't think he gets the credit for as good as Lex Luthor as he is. I think because we're so more in tune to Luthor nowadays as a really serious, dark businessman.
yeah.
And he was more out in the open, where this one he was hidden underground.
Yeah.
exactly in like a really elaborate underground setting with like a pool.
I mean, you still got the vibe that he had money. He was very intelligent. He had resources to
You get that.
and an ego. I didn't get a sense of darkness from him.
A lot of the campy scenes do come from him and his cronies.
But I don't think in the comics at that time too he was known for being so dark.
He wasn't. No.
No, he was known for being campy. They all were.
Okay.
Or even the Joker back then was really campy. It wasn't really till like the 80s and 90s where it was a different age of comics where they started going more dark tones with the villains.
And I've heard other reviews talk about Luthor in this movie as not so much of a menacing villain. Like he's not really much of an antagonist. And I can see it, especially because it's the first movie. But I think because it's the first movie, should you really just have, like, say, the guys like Zod come in right away?
I'm glad that Zod was saved for the second one.
Yeah, I'm glad they did too, because I think it would have been way too much if they would have added a little more.
It's also one of his bigger villains.
It is. Like they have a connection with each other. That's what makes it all the more powerful.
And not only that, but I think with Hackman playing a human, already figuring out Superman and his weakness and how he's already got a hot nut for trying to beat him and being like this guy comes in and he's saving the world. Wait a minute here. I'm trying to take this stuff over. And it's a human.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of more threatening than another Superman coming in and fighting him when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because, natural
Already
reaction.
here established that he's already thinking of this stuff prior to even this alien showing up.
Yes.
Right.
So it's like, yeah. But the only thing I didn't like about it was the fact that he kept calling himself a criminal genius. I'm like, if you really are, do you have to keep saying it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think it was his own narcissism. I could
a
see
lot
him,
of big egos. Yeah, exactly.
which I think
It does
fits.
fit, yeah.
But no, you're right though. Like, do you have to keep saying it? No, he doesn't have to, but he does it to let you know because it's like his badge of honor.
And
Right.
plus, he's already has that bumbling sidekick, so it's like you
Yeah,
already
exactly.
know that you're the smartest dude in the room because you clearly let the IQ drop past you.
He even has that one line where he says to Ned Beatty, "You know what the number 200 has in common between you and I? It's your weight and my IQ."
That was a good line. I like that.
You're waiting my IQ.
But also the fact that he's a human that
Can
Puts-
threaten a god.
could, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, that's impactful for a first movie.
That and also him figuring out his weakness pretty
Yes.
quickly. Like,
Right.
There's a rock that just happened to crash land the same day that Superman did.
It's all because of that Lois Lane article that kind of spills everything about Superman, and he's able to learn this quickly about what he can do, what he can't do, where he was from, and then put two and two together, and then eventually he figures out, well, we don't know if this is going to work, but this seems like the only viable option. If we get this green rock, this radioactive rock from Krypton, that could potentially be life-threatening to him.
But here's the thing: no one ever actually goes into account what the radiation will do to humans. Like, how long did he have
they
it
didn't-
prior to
Yes.
doing all this? It's like, was that the cause of him going bald, or was he bald the whole time?
You know what? That's actually a very good point.
Thought, yeah.
Although he was wearing different wigs.
A lot of wigs,
yeah.
yeah.
Even when he was going through the library and the books, he had.
I think at one point it's actually his real hair. Past that, it's just all like
Yeah.
And I know Gene Hackman didn't shave his head. He wore a skull cap.
Yep.
I think in the last scene,
Yeah.
he did not want to cut his hair or cut his mustache.
he thought he was
But he
too
did.
big for this part, so like he's like, I don't want to do this. Shave my mustache. I don't want to save that.
Yeah.
Shave my head, and then Richard Donner was like, I'll shave my mustache if you shave yours.
Yes.
Lo and behold, Richard Donner does not have a mustache. It was his paste on.
It was paste on, fooled him. Oh, I wish I could have been there to see.
He was probably pissed.
I'm sure he was.
All the cast and crew said they absolutely loved working for Richard Donner.
Yes.
And when the time came to finish the second one and they fired him, which to me doesn't make any sense at all, because the first movie was released while he was still hired, and it became this huge success. It was one of Warner Brothers' highest grossing movies.
It was at the time, yeah.
And it comes out and they fire him. Like, what sense does that make?
He had 75% of the sequel finished. And then they
Yes.
brought in a guy named Richard Lester who,
He was
correct me if
actually-
I'm wrong, didn't even know what Superman was
I
or even
heard
read a
that too.
comic.
Yeah. That doesn't make sense. Why would you do that?
I don't get that
And he
at
was
all.
actually, he was brought in to be a right-hand man for Richard Donner during the time he was there, because Donner was going back and forth with the producers.
Mm-hmm.
So Richard Lester said that he'll be the intermediate and talk to them so that the fighting would subsist, and
Yeah.
then after it, they had their talks and their conversations, and the first movie came out, they wound up firing Richard Donner, and Richard Lester took over.
All the cast, they were all on Richard Donner's side. And then when they brought Richard Lester in, some of them didn't even want to come back for like the additional shoots, so they had to have like stand-ins to do the rest of the movie. Like Margot Kidder, Gene Hackman, they didn't want to go to Richard Lester, so they actually had stand-ins in certain parts. And of course, Christopher Reeve had to because he's Superman.
Yes.
But
I don't think he had a choice at that point.
he didn't have a choice. And then years later, we got the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, which is much better.
I thought it was better, even with the screen test, and you can tell it's clearly a screen test for some of those scenes that they had. But they actually acted in it. Like, there were scenes where Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve, even though it's a screen test, they're taking it serious.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they seem to they really liked that doing that movie, so they tried to do their best to make that as possible.
They were totally committed. I mean, when Christopher Reeve was even cast, they said he's 6'4", and at the time he was 170 pounds. So
He bulked up big time.
Was it like 217 or something by the time?
He ended up, he gained a lot of muscle mass. He actually trained with
David Prowse.
David Prowse, who the actual Darth Vader, not the voice of, not James Earl Jones.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that dude's huge too.
he is. He's a tall guy.
And you got to give props to Christopher Reeve, and that's also one of the first superhero. You know how we've heard Tobey Maguire beefed up for Spider-Man, and a lot of the other actors beef up for superhero parts. Christopher Reeve is one of the first to really do that. I've heard Clint Eastwood say that back in the day, like before Arnold, was becoming huge with bodybuilding, making an impact in pop culture. Clint Eastwood said that there were guys who worked out, but they didn't take the bodybuilding seriously and looking intimidating. It was just kind of like, you jog or do some push-ups.
Just to keep your calories maintained.
Yeah,
maintain that bigger build, but not...
Exercise to a healthy lifestyle, and whatever gains you get is what you have. But gains. What's so funny about that?
I don't know. I just thought of something that was
I want to pump you up.
But they were gonna give Christopher Reeve a padded suit, and he said, "No, I'm gonna put some muscle mass on."
That's dedication, commitment to a role.
Look at the DC universe now. Everyone wanted that build. I'm glad they went with it.
Me too.
Henry Cavill's still working out.
Jeez.
Still bulking up. You're trying to get the idea of just being as powerful as anyone playing Superman can be.
That's what we call built like a brick shit house. Nobody talks about how he bulked up for that part either. I mean, he really committed himself. Same with Affleck.
Oh yeah,
Affleck did too.
He got a training montage in Batman v Superman of him bulking up.
And of course, everybody knows Christian Bale's story when he played Batman, because he got off the Machinist, and he was 120 pounds for someone who's 6'2".
I know.
And then he bulked up to, I think he said he originally got up to 230, 240, because they said just get as big as you possibly can.
And they say it was too much.
Yeah, they said he was too much. So then he had to lose weight, and you can see it too in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into Batman Begins another time, but there is like the scenes where he's training with Ra's al Ghul, where he's not quite as lean, but he's big.
You can tell. Yeah.
And then when he gets out of bed after the first night, he's a little more cut and lean, but he's still badass.
But Christopher Reeve, he's the one that started it all, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And props.
Technically, we could probably go with Adam West, dude. He had a decent build.
Did he have a decent build?
Yeah, he did. Well, even The Simpsons will tell you.
Yeah. That's also almost 20 years later?
It's true. I guess you can never take it seriously because he's playing the goofy version of Batman. He never.
Well, they even said they cast him as that character at that time because he was an athletic guy.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, you look at the pictures. I remember hearing about that as well and going, wow, that was an average athlete at the time. I have heard that so many times that if you were 160 to 180 pounds, that was a solid build for a guy. I mean, look at Sean Connery and Robert Shaw from the James Bond films.
Mm-hmm.
That was what your heroes. That's
was
what your heroes looked like. It wasn't, until Arnold and Stallone really.
And the 80s kicked in, and it was a different
Steroid
film era.
Oh, man.
And then it's so funny because I heard, for as high priced as Marlon Brando was, there was actually an interview with Christopher Reeve on David Letterman where he said Marlon Brando totally checked out. Said he felt like he got his $2 million or whatever it was and left. He didn't even memorize the lines.
He didn't. No.
Yeah, I saw they were reading that for the kid. They actually wrote it on the diaper.
Yeah, because his excuse was that he wanted to keep the dialogue and the lines fresh as doing it for the first time. And then they actually did they filmed him as they were doing a rehearsal, and then that actually ended up being the take that they used for the final product. And he has 10 minutes of screen time.
Yeah,
he just has that 10 minutes of screen time, and Krypton explodes, which I actually. The production value for that time, was amazing. And it wasn't nominated for an Oscar. And I'm kind of shocked by that because they built a city and a civilization in the Arctic. And despite the fact that the majority of the movie, some of the special effects are dated and they don't hold up, the destruction of Krypton actually looks great.
Yeah.
The people falling into their deaths and then all the crystals and the rock formations crumbling. That looks all great and authentic. and then the planet exploding, and then you can actually see the green shards of Krypton shooting off into space. There's a lot of great details.
I think the practical effects also have something to do with it.
They do.
There's a thing with practical effects that it's either it's gonna work or it's not.
Right.
You know, like you said, yes, it does show its age, but yet it's still a very solid look. It's believable. It's not like when you watch the 2002 Spider-Man and you see the CGI in it that is so obviously CGI, it kind of takes you out of it.
Special effects are going to change as time goes on. It's just going to happen naturally.
The practicality works. I mean, I think that's another key thing as to why some of the great horror movies hold up.
Because of practicality and
because of the
robotics and
practical
makeup.
effects.
Yeah.
I'd say especially with our earlier episode with The Exorcist.
Oh, with The Exorcist,
Oh, yeah.
practical effects in that.
Practical effects wins. Always does.
With the shots, with when Linda Blair levitated on the bed, you know, that's something that it looked real. It's like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
And that's true movie magic right there, and that's something that I think nowadays kind of lacks. I mean, maybe it's because there is the Wizard of Oz. You know, you see the man behind the curtain now.
That kind of sucks because, like, honestly, I do enjoy, as much as we all enjoy CGI, like, the practicality does make it look better. Like, going from literally watching them just get rid of the wires or thin wires so that he could watch them fly, now you've got an animated dude just flying instead. I'm like, it kind of takes away from the whole sequence. It doesn't feel as, like, intense.
I feel the same way with like every time I see The Incredible Hulk.
Okay.
Not just the movie, but I mean the character.
Yeah.
I just know it's CGI. I mean, no matter how it does look 10 times better than what it did, say, like when that really crappy 2003 movie came out. Even when the Incredible Hulk movie with Edward Norton came out, you know, it looks a lot better. I remember it looked its best in the first Avengers movie.
I can see that.
I think it looked like it actually looked like real. Like they got the muscle tone and made it look actually like skin was on them and not just green flesh.
It looked like a green tint.
Like they actually put pores and
Wait, I thought you said green titted.
Sorry, tint. Green tint.
Are you allowed to say green tint?
My diction's got to come out a little bit better. Diction. Unique. New York. I think a classic example of when practical effects beat CGI, a classic example is the original Star Wars trilogy compared to The Phantom Menace. The reason why practical effects hold up this day is when they're done because they're real models that were actually filmed. They're in existence. And then when you have a film like The Phantom Menace, when you're trying to cram so many computer-generated images into one shot, you get things that are just going to be unfocused and unbalanced. And that's one of the biggest flaws that movie had, was trying to put so much on the screen at once.
That was also,
and it was all fake.
That was also Lucas with all his yes men that were
His yes man.
Yeah.
No one wanted to challenge him
and say, "Yo, bro,"
because he's the guy that signs the checks in the end. This is his brainchild.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah.
Should we get into the ending?
Yeah.
After
we've gotten off track.
A little bit off track.
But it's incorporated with
this
the
is still about
movie.
Superman.
Yes.
This
Because
is all tying to Superman.
but we're talking about this stuff because of what Superman brings to the table.
Yeah.
You know, like look at like how the practical effects make an impact to the movie, how the story, how the commitment to the actors, how this, like the spawning from Arnold to influencing others, to Christopher Reeve's dedication, to how Marlon Brando, like he's a big name, but yet he really didn't fully commit to it.
Oh no. This is just a paycheck for him.
To how this isn't a comic book movie. I mean, it is, but it's not like the Marvel and the DC universe that we know today.
No,
it's not following the comic book formula, incorporating heavy on comic book storylines. This was a movie that was made for everybody.
Yeah.
And it was, look at what we can do. We can bring this guy to life, and you'll actually watch this movie and go, is this guy really flying? Am I
Right.
actually seeing this?
This wasn't just a movie for the fans, it was appealing to everybody.
Yes.
Because you didn't have to be a diehard comic book fan to know everything that was going on in the movie. You could, if you weren't a comic book reader, you could follow everything that's going on in this movie. And that's one of the strengths that this movie has. And that's what probably drew more people into wanting to read the Superman comics. One thing I really liked, a little tidbit, was when Superman crash lands to Earth when he's a 3-year-old child, and then he comes upon the Kents. When he lifts that car up, as the wheel breaks down, that's got to be a big tribute to the first ever Action Comics of Superman actually picking a car up.
yeah.
That is so cool. Then I realized, I'm like, oh my god, he actually lifts the car as a 3-year-old. But that is harkening back to the first ever Action Comics of Superman picking a car up
On the cover.
on the cover.
I actually never made that correlation at first until the other day. Like as you're watching it, you're even the same way he's standing. Like and all he really is missing is the cape, but it's actually tied around his waist.
Tied around his waist.
So it's like it's there. They did a great job of like just going. Here's a little bit of an Easter egg.
Subtle. Yes, very subtle.
But it's
it
like
worked.
once again the mass non-comic book character comic book reading fans wouldn't have caught it. But it's just like I'm 32 and I just realized it now after watching it for like 27th time or whatever.
But it's really, this movie, talking about special effects, it really does a lot is done at the end. Especially with the ending when
nukes
Gene
going
Hackman
off.
detonates the nukes, and one is going to California, the other one's going to Jersey.
Yes.
To,
It's just so random.
it's so
I didn't even think about that. I'm like,
I know, Hoboken, New Jersey, is that where?
Hackensack.
Hackensack.
And the only reason why we know is because Valerie Perrine plays Eve Tessmacher. Miss Tessmacher!
I did not know that was her name.
And she says that her mom lives in Hackensack, and Gene Hackman just looks down at his watch and shakes his head like, not anymore. And Superman has a kryptonite necklace on that's killing him, and he's in the pool drowning, and Valerie Perrine goes in to save him, and she says, I'll save you if you go save my mother first and stop that bomb.
Stop the nuke first, yeah. And what she does, he just sends it out into the earth and then sends it out into the atmosphere. Then he flies back to California, basically. But it's already too late, though. It's already gone off, and the earthquake has already begun. I love that when he's going underneath all the molten rock, trying to push the foundation back up to prevent all the other earthquakes from happening. And the Hoover Dam is exploding, and, like the towns are at stake. And despite all this, he wasn't able to save Lois.
No.
And it goes back to when Pa Kent had a heart attack. Despite all these powers that he has, there are some things and some people that he just can't save. And that's powerful.
Mm-hmm. And you don't expect that in the movie. Like when you
don't.
see the love interest
Absolutely
die,
not.
you're like, wait, and it's Superman.
It's Superman.
This is the first major comic book movie of the ultimate superhero, and the love interest dies.
Yeah.
What?
Crushed by all this debris and rock, and he's holding her. And then you just get a couple different shots from different angles, and then you just see him looking at her body, and he has that big, heartbreaking scream into the sky. And he flies off. You're not sure. It almost seems like he doesn't know what he's going to do. He just decides out of pure anger and emotion to just fly around the earth. Maybe this will work. Maybe it won't. To fly around as many times as he can. A lot of people have a problem with that scene. Like, the only issue I have is what happens after he flies around the earth 100 times. Like, but the scene is great, though. Like, he's actually got tears running down his face as he's trying to reverse the polarity of the Earth's gravitational pull and rotation. Things are going back in time, and then he reverses it back again just a little bit to bring it back into time. But then he saves Lois, and then all these disasters don't happen anymore. What about the missile? My biggest question is, what about the missile? The missile's still active, though. Did it just vaporize, or did it not detonate? I was confused by that. So he saves Lois, and I guess he saves the town, but the missile is forgotten about. What happened to the missile? It still is detonated.
Maybe,
Unless
it's maybe like the concept was like, yeah, he spun back time, but just enough that the missile still detonated, but yet it was. I don't even know. I can't even explain that. It sounds like bullshit, right?
that's like that was going through my mind. Like, okay, he saved Lois, and then he flies off, and now he's going to get Luthor, and Otis brings him to prison, but then in the back of my mind, I'm just like, okay, you saved the day, but what about the missile? Okay, you stopped the one missile, but what's the other one?
But wait. Here, how about this? Here's a theory I'm going to go with.
Okay.
Maybe they never got launched because if everything got put back together where it belonged, maybe they never even launched. Maybe that's what they were implying because nothing broke, nothing was there, but it still ended up.
But I think, but even Lois, she talks about the gas station exploding and her car stopping.
yes,
she's out of
right.
gas, and she's like,
You never have a man of steel around when you need him.
She's distraught, like, where the hell have you been? Like, I just witnessed a gas explosion, my car's out of gas, and like all this stuff is going on. This guy wants to buy all this land. Where were you?
Well,
where's Kent?
Well, I think the real reason why it's confusing like that is because the original ending to Superman 1, from what I had seen in documentaries, was he just stops the nukes, he throws the one into space, and it blows up the Phantom Zone, releasing
That's right.
Zod and Non and Ursa. And he just sends Otis and Lex Luthor to prison.
Okay.
But Warner Brothers had said that they liked the ending because they had already shot the ending to 2. That was originally just supposed to be for 2, him spinning the Earth around.
Okay.
And they said they liked it so much that they wanted it in the first one.
The first movie.
That's
okay.
probably why.
Okay.
Okay.
So
they did forget about
so
it. That's the issue.
storyline wise, it doesn't make sense.
It does,
but
yes.
I think it does. I think it does work better though in the first movie.
Oh yeah.
I think it does too.
If he would have just did that and set up for a second one.
I mean, it really gives that emotional pull of Lois's death and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you really start feeling it because they had this great, beautiful moment together when they're flying in the Earth's atmosphere. You can tell that these two care about each other. How is it going to work? We don't know, but they're just soaking in the moment. And it's really nice and very, very beautiful in a way. And then she's dead.
Yeah.
And then because of the earthquake and because of Lex Luthor detonating the bombs. Oh, yeah. And then he flies off. You get that great shot of him in the earth, and he looks at the camera and just kind of does like a little nod. Then he pans up, and then that's the end.
That's it.
Gone.
Yeah.
Gone.
And then
Till the
Superman 4 had the nerve and the balls to just recolor it and end it the same way. Oh my god, so bad.
We can't talk about that.
But enough about This is we can talk about Superman 4, the quest for suck, and everything else it does wrong. Yeah.
It's like the George Clooney of.
Yes,
It is.
I was gonna say.
Why is it always the fourth film?
Yeah.
That, like ruins the franchise.
It seems like there's a 1 and 2 that are good, and then 3 and 4 drift off.
Why is it that?
I don't
Superman
know.
4, Quest for Peace, Batman, Robin, Jaws, The Revenge.
I just thought of this. So we've got Richard Pryor in Superman 3, and then we got Jim Carrey in Batman Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got 2 high-paid comedians as villains.
This is a good point. I never picked up on that until now.
I
That's
just
so
as you guys were
funny.
talking about it. I'm like,
Huh.
That is a good
about that?
point. Huh. Oh man.
we do have a special guest. My daughter Thea's here.
So if you hear little baby squeals in the background,
Yeah, she just woke up.
She's a future Superman fan.
alrighty. Let's go around the table. Say favorite scene, least favorite scene. What do you guys take away from it? And John, we'll start with you.
Wait, no, fuck him. Last time he made us all look bad.
All right, Jeff.
I was gonna save you for last since it's your superhero, but you can do it. Hey, you guys can do whatever you want. If you want me to go first, I'll go first.
Go ahead first.
Yeah,
go ahead.
All right. Superman is definitely not a perfect movie. Of course, it had its fair share of issues behind the scenes, but you have to appreciate what it is for what it is, really. I mean, the time that it was made was revolutionary. The special effects are great. I also like the fact that it was a movie that was made for a general audience, that you didn't have to be a comic book fan to love it. It could be for everybody and anybody, kids, family.
Yeah.
And my biggest takeaway is that it's a hero from another world that's extraordinary, that disguises himself to blend in with other people, that almost wouldn't mind going unsung, really, if he could, because he's not out for the fame, he's not getting nothing for it. He just knows I don't want to go back to the Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, but he realizes that there's a lot of good in the world and that the world's worth fighting for, and there are people worth fighting for, and if you got this power, why not utilize it for the sake of humanity and for anything that can benefit good. And I just thought that was a really good message to send. And if we had, like, there's always that one person that makes an impact on our lives, whether it can be for good or bad. Mm-hmm. You know, for bad is obviously not good, but sometimes you take what they say, you know, and you can turn it into something good. It's like when a superhero does say, you know, your knowledge and abilities, if you applied that to doing good, imagine how much further we'd be in the world. Oh, yeah. And it is one of those things. I know Brightburn's going to be coming out, but could you imagine if Superman was bad? We'd all be screwed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we would not be having any kind of universes, kind of all the comic book properties that have exploded in the last 40 years or so. I mean, they really came into fruition in 2008 with Iron Man and The Dark Knight. That's when it really took off. Mm-hmm. But people would have just taken superhero movies as a joke. Yeah. And it wouldn't have cared maybe as much and not give them enough budget to go behind, and they just kind of drift off.
Yeah. And as a filmmaker and as a lover of cinema, I gotta say I really appreciate what the cast and crew, everybody did to make this movie. I think it was very important for the film business, for the genre, and I mean these actors too in it that took it seriously instead of just saying, oh, this could be campy and stupid, and mm-hmm. they really made you believe it. And I really do enjoy Henry Cavill as Superman, but I gotta say, to me, Christopher Reeves is still hands down the best.
To a lot of people.
This movie does get a little hard for me to watch because the interviews, you can tell Christopher Reeves does seem like a really good guy, and it's a damn shame what happened to him in life. Mm-hmm. But he did try to still be inspiring even in, you know, a paralyzed state, and after playing a character like Superman, that's really commendable, and to still keep his chin up like that, it's like, wow. I mean, you might.
Ron Williams definitely helped him out a lot.
Oh yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Trying to cheer him up, making him laugh, and see the bright side of things.
As far as a favorite scene, I'd probably have to say it's the first time he rips the shirt off. Yeah. And because it has everything. You know, we talked about the music that's so important. Mm-hmm. And it's the first time we see him really become Superman in the element, save the day, save Lois yet. Oh, yeah. Which was like everything that should have happened, you know. You get your love interest, you save the day, you're known throughout everybody, you show the S on the chest, the music's playing. That to me, that's got to be my favorite scene. And then he just goes around, does the montage of everything. Yeah. And you know who he is by the end of the night. As far as the least favorite scene goes, I got to say it's the part where him and Lois are flying during the interview. Okay. And she's saying things like, "Can you read my mind?" And she's like, "I act like, you know, I feel like a schoolgirl right now."
She was supposed to sing that.
Yeah, I heard she was supposed to sing.
She was supposed to sing that part, and then Richard Donner realized that was stupid. Not. He's like, "No, just say it."
I think it would have been better without any dialogue, and the dialogue killed it.
I agree too. Oh, yeah. I think it could have been better without anything.
I don't agree with him holding her hand out either.
Okay.
And it looks like she's flying, and then at one point he lets her go, and he makes it look like, oh, oops, I better go get her. And I'm like,
might have made the scene a little better. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. And they kind of reference Peter Pan too before that happens, so I guess you can kind of forgive it, but it does look like Peter Pan a little bit. Like, this isn't Peter Pan.
It just kind of took me out of it too. The lines were cheesy. It was going well. I think they could have cut that scene down. That's my least favorite scene. So there we go.
Okay, for me, I I could go on and say that every scene with Christopher Reeve, even as he's Clark Kent, is just awesome to watch. And just watching his little nuances going from one character to another and how different they appear, even though his physical appearance is still the same, just his hair is different. He's not wearing glasses. But if I had to pinpoint, my favorite scene is definitely when he gets the kryptonite necklace off of his neck and then he's recovering, and then he goes out and saves the day and thwarts the one missile. I love the scene where he's, as I said before, he's underneath the earth, all the molten rock, and just trying to put everything back together. That's when you really get to see Superman's like full power come into fruition, and just like that really heart-wrenching scream after Lois dies, and then him flying around the earth. That's when you really see him stretch his acting muscles. That's probably my favorite scene, is when he gets that kryptonite necklace off. It's like, all right, yeah. Go get the bad guys. Go save the day. Even more than when he rips the shirt off and you see the ass. That's great too. But like when you actually see him at his most vulnerable and at his most down, that's when he really just comes into the full. I really love that scene. And then my least favorite scene, as I said before, is really the no explanation of the missile and just kind of how the whole movie kind of ends. It just kind of ends with Lex Luthor and Otis are brought to prison, and then that's it. And I just wish there was a little bit more at the end. It just felt like they were kind of rushing a little bit, even though the movie was almost 2.5 hours long. Another thing I almost thought I was going to not like was just like how the pacing, but I actually I couldn't hate the pacing. Even though there are these big crazy times, busy time jumps, like from age 3 to age 16 to age 30. How old is he as Superman? Does he even say?
I think he's about 30.
30 something? Yeah. Like these crazy time jumps, you'd almost think there's a problem with that because like we've missed so much of him and like in his training or how he was dealing with being an alien kid and trying to suppress his powers, and the Kents trying to help him out with this. You don't really get a whole lot of that except for like 1 or 2 scenes, and then it just moves on. But they really put a lot in this movie for under 2.5 hours. And I can't hate the pacing because of that. I can't hate it because it does flow. But like I said, like I wish the ending was a little bit better. I do wish that they didn't rush through the ending a little bit, and some things were maybe not necessarily explained, but shown to us as the audience. Shown to us. I think that's probably what I would have liked, rather than just having a quick save Lois, put the bad guys in prison, fly off out of Earth, and that's it. I kind of wish there was a little bit more at the end. So that would probably be my least favorite scene. And then the missile thing, which we've been going back and forth. Like that just kind of bothered me a little bit. Yeah, it's a campy movie, but at times it's campy, but you can't hate it for that. It's great, and it really, besides the dated special effects, it really holds. It still holds up.
I think so too.
Yeah, I agree.
It's from the 70s. I mean, from the costumes, special effects, even the clothing, but it's still a very solid movie, and it should be appreciated for what it is. Do you have a takeaway from it?
I think I'm good.
All right.
I think I'm good.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff.
Your turn to shine.
Honestly, my favorite part about the movie wasn't actually really like the biggest moment. It was actually the first time that him and Lois go out and they actually get mugged. The scene where he actually grabs a bullet and you actually get to see Clark Kent as a full weakling. And like you said earlier, John, about him fainting. It's like in catching the bullet, making it look like, yeah, but it's like that was brilliant. Probably my favorite part because like everyone's like, oh yeah, Superman's this big strong dude, but truthfully, like there's the dual part where him being that weak person that no one really takes notice to.
Yeah.
And as like just showing that, like how Christopher Reeves was able to switch between the two, fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then following up with what was in the purse. There was always hints there that he's Superman.
Yeah.
What if he would have said, "Hey, what's that Trojan doing in there?"
Yeah. Excuse me? Oh, it's sticking out of the top.
Oh man.
But I would have to agree with John with the end. Like the whole like, here you go, here's the end. Like it was just not even like really like elaborate. It was just like, laid out right in front of you. Just kind of like, here you go. But yeah, missile, them like literally just wrapping this up like, yeah, we ran out of time, so let's just do this. But But the biggest takeaway I would take from this is actually like everything together. Like it was an amazing movie. It may have had a lackluster ending, but even the score itself is what made this movie fantastic. And,
The score was awesome.
yeah.
I think if it didn't have the score, especially because the score was so serious, even in its campy moments, it's like it was okay to laugh because the movie was hilarious.
Yeah.
You know, it had
All the adult humor.
it had really good action. It had adult humor. It had some like funny kiddie humor.
Oh, yeah.
Too in a way.
Him saving the cat from the
Yeah.
tree. Yeah.
You gotta throw that in for
Yeah.
the kids,
Throw
right?
for the kids.
But the music helped you go. It's okay to laugh and feel good about this scene.
Oh yeah.
So
I guess one last thing. After watching this movie, I was almost even more detested of Superman Returns, of how lazy that whole movie felt and how much they took from the original Superman movie and put it in Superman Returns. There are so many things that I could just nitpick about Superman Returns now with like the plane sequence. There's a plane sequence in the first one. Lois Lane fainting. You know, the girl crony from Lex Luthor feeling really bad about hurting and killing Superman. She saves his life. And then there's like the
Kumar has a cameo.
the glorified extra that Kal Penn has. Oh yeah, he's a glorified extra in that movie.
He doesn't even talk.
But I just kind of got more detested with Bryan Singer's movie because of how great everything happened in this first movie and how lazy that movie felt. And just like they just took the moments with Marlon Brando coming back in, and that was like other footage, like Lex Luthor's plan, the newspapers, the bumbling idiots. I mean, there are
I didn't care for Kevin Spacey in that movie either.
the opening credits scene, like so much. You know, it's almost like they tried to replicate the first movie, and yeah, they did a few things, but it kind of they didn't go in their own new direction. It just kind of pissed me off a little bit.
That ending to Superman Returns was atrocious.
And then having a
too.
kid, like he would have like blown his load right through Lois and killed her.
Shotgun it right through her back.
Shotgun it right through her back. She'd be dead. There's no way.
They need a kryptonite condom, but that would kill him.
Oh, God.
Honestly, like out of everything, I did not want to bring up that movie at all. That's why I skirted right over it.
Way to go, John.
After I saw the movie, I'm like, I couldn't help but think how lazy Superman Returns was after I saw this movie.
So with that being said, do you like Superman 4 better?
Yes, I would agree to that one.
Oh my god, that's another statement. That's another conversation.
Like I said, we could talk about another hour's worth about that movie.
I think we need episodes just to like rip on movies. We're talking about good ones for now. Try to build an audience.
Yeah. So.
Alrighty. Well, I guess that wraps it up for our episode on Superman. And
We'll see y'all next time.
see y'all next time. On to the next one.
Hope you guys enjoy it.
Seriously, hey, if you haven't seen it, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Go check this movie out. It's all available on, I think it's on Netflix or the DC streaming service. It's available anywhere. I mean, you won't have a problem finding this movie if you haven't seen it. But we spoiled the whole movie for you. Spoiler: it came out 41 years ago. So, check it out. You just need to see it.
It's a fun movie. It's not just action and popcorn. It's made for everybody, and it's highly recommended.
It's something the whole family can enjoy, even if you're not a comic book fan.
Yeah.
So
It was the tipping point and starting point to heavy special effects and comic books, even though comic books didn't take off every year like you have them. But it definitely is the one that started it, and a lot of people put a lot of heart and soul in this. And with that, I mean, we got a lot to be thankful for. So
yeah, absolutely.
have an appreciation for this movie and have an appreciation for what it did to cinema in general as well.
And to this day, statistically speaking, flight is the safest way to travel.
And it takes traveling at the speed of light to actually turn back time.
Yeah.
So traveling at 183 billion miles an hour?
Something like that.
I could do that.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Anyway, that wraps up our episode of Superman. Thank you all for joining us, and we shall see you all later.
Please, somebody help me.